Welcome back to Beacon in the Storm. I'm your host, Dr. Bradford Carlton. Today, I have a very special guest with us. I have author, speaker, and coach, and CEO and founder of HDO Health, Bryan Stewart. Hey there, Bryan. How's it going?
It's going great. Great to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Absolutely. I truly appreciate it. It's always a good day to have someone here to help us talk about the Lord. So thank you so much for joining us.
My
Now,
pleasure.
Bryan, why don't you begin by just telling us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, I live here in Birmingham, Alabama. I'm spent some time in the Marine Corps as an infantry officer, and then the last 25 or so years I've been in the healthcare industry and multiple different segments of healthcare. And then more recently, the last 3 or 4 years, have been on what I call my entrepreneurship journey. Founded HDO Health, and we're working to commercialize some life-saving medical devices.
Absolutely.
As you mentioned, I also work with another firm called Victory Strategies, where I do executive coaching, strategy development, and also author articles on servant leadership, humility, things like that.
Beautiful. All right, so you're a good guy to talk to about this stuff then, right?
I hope so. Yeah, we'll see.
All right. So we'll begin with this, what I believe is a simple question. Some people nowadays don't think it's so simple, but Bryan, in your opinion, what does it mean to be a man?
Well, certainly go back to the biblical definition, trying to fulfill, God's original design for me as a man. But I think certainly it means obeying his word. It means loving and respecting and honoring your spouse. And it means living with integrity and character, taking care of others and putting the needs of others before your needs most of the time, I think is imperative part of being a man.
Okay. And is this something that you learned when you were young in the Marines? Did you have to come to learn this, or is this just kind of ingrained? You knew it?
Probably a combination of all those. Certainly had great introductory into terms of what I'll call foundational leadership and manhood in the Marine Corps from my experiences there. And then, had mentors along the way. I credit a lot of that with my maternal grandfather, Howard Benton, about, hard work and perseverance and being a man of character, being generous with your time and your goods, etc. And then through, other friends, networks, a lot from, I'll say, men's groups, particularly even the last couple of years have been engaged in a couple of men's groups where conversations every week about what does it mean to be a man? How do we walk that out every day? How do we support each other in that? Because it is hard, particularly I would say in today's culture now more than ever to be a man, with people trying to deconstruct the very definition of what that is and what it means. So variety of sources, but I think it's important for men to find other men who can support them in that journey.
I agree. Now, do you think it's kind of been more difficult to figure out what it means to be a man? Is it really just this kind of culture coming down and changing how we think? Is it parents? Is it the politicians? What is causing this? Why do I have to ask the question, what does it mean to be a man?
Yeah, it's a great, yeah. I think it's gotten diluted over time. I think sometimes it's a case of you can't give others what you don't have. If your cup isn't full, if you never were instructed about what it means to be a man or how to walk out your life as a faithful, strong man, then I think it's hard for you to impart that to your son or daughter or whomever, So I think that's part of it. It's generational. I'll just term the term leakage, maybe, where it's the strong definition of being a man and manhood and what it means to walk through manhood has diminished over time and has leaked from generation to generation. I will say one thing I did in particular with my son when he was 15, not that this was my idea, but we did a walk to manhood where I engaged several other Christian men that I knew, some that knew my son really well, some that didn't know him as well. And we actually went to a park and we walked. It was like a 1.5 mile walk through this circular park.
Okay.
And at different points along the trail, we encountered these other men. And as we stopped at each point, they shared scripture with my son, shared life lessons, and actually gave him, whether it was a writing or a small gift, and encouraged him as he sort of completed his walk to manhood. The main lesson I tried to teach my son with that is, as a man, it's imperative to never walk alone.
Yeah.
And this particular trail is in fairly wooded area. And the analogy was, imagine if you were walking by yourself. It's hard to maintain, your vision forward, and to the side, you're easily picked off. Someone could be waiting and ambush you pretty easily. But now that I'm here with you, I've got your back. You're looking forward, I'm looking around. It's much more difficult for someone to attack you or take you out from a figurative, sense, if you're not walking alone. So that was my main lesson was, as a man, it's important to not walk alone. Don't go on the journey by yourself, because it's hard enough to do with someone else, much less, I would say, nearly impossible to do if you're trying to do it alone.
All right, that's awesome. That sounds like a coaching program just waiting to be made.
Yeah, I think it could be valuable for other men to explore, like how they have these. In some cultures they have different rituals and processes that young men go through to cross the threshold from boyhood to manhood. I think that's something we've also lost as a cultural, or those seminal moments where we say, hey, now you're no longer a child. You're expected to behave and grow like a man. And here's wisdom, advice, counsel, other men to support you. But sort of passing the torch to you, you now are a man and are expected to act as such moving forward.
Absolutely. Now, Bryan, we did discuss the purpose of my show is to lead men to the Lord. And I always like to begin kind of that conversation with the question, why is faith so important? Why do we need faith in the first place?
From my personal opinion is, I don't know how people survive in today's world if they don't have faith, just given where we're at with so many pressures and competing messages that aren't helpful or healthy. That I would say, if you don't have faith, I candidly don't know how people do it. Maybe that's why our suicide rates, particularly among men, are so high. Is if they don't have that, it's easy to be picked off by the negative messages and just the difficulties of life. So I think that's one reason why faith is important. Also, I think it's important because we need to realize that this life really isn't about us. Particularly if you're in a leadership role, I tell people, like, it's never been about you. It's never going to be about you. So the sooner you understand and embrace that really we're all put here for a purpose. It's, you're on your own journey to figure out what it is specifically for you, but just know that it's not to serve yourself in any way, shape, or form. So I think that's another critical component of why faith is important, is becoming educated and informed about what that actually means and how to walk that out day to day. And particularly when times are difficult or when the world is screaming at you. Don't do that. Do what feels good for you and do what's good for you. Don't worry about anyone else, which is, I think, kind of where we're at for the most part.
All right. So let's kind of take it to the next step now. Say that you have a man, or we're working with someone who feels faith, but they don't. How do we get them to Christ? How do we get them to understand that there is an answer to their problems? Because my whole message, I began this show because of the suicide issue. When I found out 80% of suicides are men in the United States, and it's the leading cause of death behind accidents for people under the age of 45 or men under the age of 45, I had to talk about this. And I knew that Christ is the answer. So how do we better lead men, or how can we lead men to Christ so that they can have that internal fortitude, resilience that'll help them move forward?
Yeah, my cliche term is you have to walk the talk. I mean, other men have to see something in you that they find attractive. Like, wow, I know this guy's going through a lot. He's got problems at work or at home, but yet he seems to handle it well. He's not cracking under the pressure. He still seems to maintain his joy. He's still serving other people. So I think some of it is being the light on the hill, whatever your analogy is, having other men see something in you that goes, wow, what's keeping this guy, or what's empowering this guy to continue putting his right foot in front of his left foot every day when things seem difficult. I think leading by example, being a man of integrity, and being available. So it's one thing to be living that life on your own, but if you're not available or you're not seeking opportunities to be around other men or for other men to find you, then really what good are you? Mm-hmm. So in addition to walking your talk, it's finding opportunities to connect with other men, whether it's men's groups, social connections. I'm a veteran. I think the suicide issue, as you know, is particularly problematic or prevalent in the veteran community. So I do a lot in serving others who have served. So I think it goes back to what I mentioned earlier, is just kind of realizing it's not about you. So it requires effort. People aren't just going to show up at your doorstep and say, hey, I'm a man and I need help and I'm depressed. That's never going to happen, or that's highly unlikely to happen. So I think it requires effort and engagement and being deliberate about what you do and how you do it. And then being willing to be vulnerable yourself and say, hey, yeah, I've gone through the same thing or similar things. Here's what I found, and here's what I think might help you. So that's my somewhat short answer, I suppose.
All right. So you brought up servant leader earlier, so it's right there. I hear you.
Okay,
That's
good.
Same. That's it. That's what you're talking about. You have to set the example. You have to be the one to go out there. We can't wait for them to come to us. A lot of the guests I've had on will talk about how men can develop what they need to in order to accept Christ. When you said no, like it's our job to go find them and help them. I love that.
Yeah, I think in our society, I mean, there's so many resources that we have at our fingertips that even a generation ago, it didn't exist. So in some ways, there are no excuses for a man not to find those things, but it's easy to say that. I think it's a dual-edged sword. Like as a man, you're responsible to go and find help or find the Lord. He's there waiting for you. And also, I mean, between the internet and groups and social media, it's not difficult to find a group of other men to connect with if you just go looking for it.
That's right. Okay, so say someone has been a part of the faith. Say that they did church going, full believer, but then life got in the way. You know, the challenges, the trials, it all stacked up, and they kind of fell out. How can we help pull them back in? How can we help them find that spark once more?
I think it goes with just being genuine and transparent to say, number one, you're not alone. You're not the first guy that's fallen off the wagon, whatever that might be, whether it's addiction, whether it's financial, whether it's, relational, whatever the issue is, you're not the first one. You won't be the last one. And more than likely, if you have a group of 10 guys, someone's either going through the exact same thing or just finished going through the exact same thing. So letting them know it's okay, you're not alone, number one. Number two, as we all know, or those that have, that are believers, that, there is a such thing as forgiveness. But that requires repentance and requires you to do something different. So yeah, you may have made a mistake or fallen off the wagon or you've fallen out of faith, but I think God is always there with open arms welcoming us back if we're willing to take the step to move back to him. So that's what I would say there is just, number one, making it easy, and number two, making no judgments. Just letting them know you're not alone. Hey, let's work on this together and get back where you want to be on track.
Perfect. All right, now, Bryan, how do you help spread the word personally? So you said you do work with veterans. Do you help spread the word to them, or is it like, because I want to know, how are you spreading the kingdom of the Lord?
Yeah, and sometimes I wrestle with this, like, how overt do I be about my faith? Even simple things about like my LinkedIn profile or how I introduce myself. I say I hopefully do it by providing that example that I'm actually walking out what I believe in. Although I do let people know that like my faith is important to me, even in the vocabulary that I choose. Not so much like, I don't use, foul language or whatever. But it's more about, talking about blessings and talking about prayer. And one of the things I found is particularly powerful is the tool of gratitude, and using that in companies that I've led, even in the companies that I lead now. We start every single meeting with, what are you thankful for today? If you call my cell phone number in my voicemail, it says, oh yeah, one more thing before you hang up. What are you thankful for today? So I think in trying to get people to be thoughtful about what they're grateful for, I think a lot of times can bring like, well, I'm grateful for this or that. And usually those things are things that are provided for by the Lord. There's not usually like, well, I'm thankful for my car or my watch. It's like, I'm thankful for my family or for my health or for, provision to pay my bills or whatever it is. And then I think from one-on-one connections, kind of peeling back the layer of the onion with guys in particular, just being upfront, like, hey, my faith is very important to me. Here's how I walk that out. Here's how I'm connected to other men. And then I think also for men, stories can be powerful. So having kind of I look at them as like arrows in my quiver, depending on the guy that I'm talking to, the scenario, I have stories that I can pull out of my own experiences or my own failures that resonate with him to go, yeah, okay, this guy he's for real. He's not trying to judge me. He's not trying to, quote unquote, cram religion down my throat, but he's just sharing what his life experiences are and how it's transformed, his life. So I think that's what people resonate with, not, trying to beat them over the head with, well, you should stop doing this, or you need to come to church, or I think there's a time and place for those kinds of conversations, but I don't think that's what attracts people. That propels.
I'll tell you, I've had a few guests who that's the method they would prefer, but I like your method, Bryan.
Yeah, in my own life, I found that not to be effective. I think that maybe for some that's effective, but I don't think that works well.
All right. Well, Bryan, this has been a wonderful interview. Thank you so much. If someone wanted to reach out to you, how could they do so?
I'm on LinkedIn, Bryan Stewart, or my, I don't know if your guests normally give out email, but I'm easy to find on social media. If you look up Bryan Stewart or HDO Health, you'll easily find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best spot to connect with me. And my contact info is on my LinkedIn profile.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Bryan. We genuinely appreciate you having you on today.
My pleasure.
All right. And for everybody else, I'm going to remind you all, keep looking for the light in the tempest. God will show you the way.